How's it going, everybody? Jordan here, and in today's video I'm going to show you my new and improved ultimate Tri-Brid build. Yes, that's right, Tri, because it hits Hunter, Assassin, and Warrior damage all in one. This build can one-shot any resistant mercenary with a Predator headshot, rush assassinate, or critical assassinate any resistant assassin mercenary in a single hit, as well as pack a huge punch with your AoE staff damage, and I was even able to sneak in some melee resistance, making this build able to take some hits. This build literally does it all and was really hard to tweak and optimize. It took me hours and hours to do this to get it to where it is, and the best part is it doesn't require any DLC or Helix items, although there are a few perks and abilities that do help, but I'll go over that later. As always, if you have any questions, you can join our awesome Discord community or message them on Twitter, or join my live streams at twitch.tv/itsJordanDoes and ask me when I'm streaming on Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday. Alright, let's get right into it. Instead of doing a long-winded intro about key features of this build, I decided to just go over the build as we walk through it because there's so much to talk about and feature. I'd rather just do that, and so let's get right into the details. As you can see, in order to optimize and get this build to where we are, we're relying incredibly on epic items here. And the big feature of this build is you're going to notice that there are split primary perks between Warrior, Hunter, and Assassin here. And the thing to keep in mind here is you have exactly 8 pieces of gear. So it's really hard, I understand, to track down epic gear to make a build like this, but what makes this build probably easier to get is the primary perks can change based on what gear you're using. So what do I mean? So there's 8 pieces of gear here. As you can see, my waist, chest, and glove pieces all have assassin damage. So you're just going to want to find 3 pieces of gear that have similar or exact perks as any other piece of gear, as long as 3 of the gear has assassin damage, 3 of the gear has hunter damage, and that includes the Atlantean blade, which is a key part of all this, and then just make sure that 2 pieces have warrior damage on it. And again, it doesn't matter which one they're at. So for example, if you have an assassin crit and poison staff, but you have a warrior poison and crit, you can easily swap those pieces out. That way, just focus on the 3 assassin pieces, the 3 hunter pieces, and the 2 warrior pieces. That being said, all the perks and engravings on these pieces of gear are very intentional and specific, and so you're gonna want to really kind of track those down and use the smart loot system to get the gear so that you can make this build. This build does require a bit more ability points as well, so I would suggest that you have at least around 100 in order to get this, and if you don't worry about it. You'll be able to engrave or adjust. You can kind of give up on either a full hunter attack and just focus on assassin warrior or something of that nature, and I'll kind of go over that too. So your primary weapon is going to be an epic staff with the perks of crit damage and poison damage. We're leaning as poison as our main damage dealer. Now the engraving here is a helix engraving that I'm using to get 5% more damage while I'm at full health here, but if you still want this to work and you don't have that engraving, you can easily engrave the 25% damage against elites and bosses here instead, and it still gives you the same impact. But if you have the Hammer of Horns engraving, which is this one, it gives you a 5% more damage boost. That's why I use it, but it's not necessary. The secondary weapon is the Atlantean blade. This gives us hunter damage, crit damage, armor penetration, which is amazing for increasing your hunter and warrior damage, and then we engrave poison damage. The biggest thing you're going to notice here is almost everything except for maybe headshot damage is overall damage increasers across all 3 playstyles, which is allowing us to hit all this huge damage as a hunter, as an assassin, and as a warrior. With this build, we're going to be able to one-shot people with our bow, with our staves, and with our assassination. And a lot of that comes from the fact that armor penetration here helps both hunters and warrior damage. For your bow, we have hunter damage, poison, crit chance, and then we engraved headshot damage here. Now, hunter damage can easily be one of the biggest things to fall off when making a hybrid build, and the best way to get it back quickly is by putting a couple headshot engravings on the build. Now, that assumes that every hunter shot you hit will be a headshot, so you're gonna have to be pretty accurate in order to make that damage work. So make sure that you're kind of practicing or working on that as well. For the head, you want headshot damage, crit damage, and then 20% crit chance while at full health, or any variation. So if you have crit chance at full health and crit damage, then you can engrave headshot damage or anything like that. Right now we have 100% headshot damage, so our hunter damage increased very significantly because of this. For our gauntlets, we have crit chance, crit damage, and crit damage while at full health. These gauntlets are pretty much on every epic build that I put on, just because it gives you 10% crit chance and 150% crit damage when you're at full health. So it's a fantastic piece of gear to put on any one of these builds. For the chest, we have poison damage, crit damage, and then we're engraving the all elusive all damage piece. Now, the only reason and the only time that I would ever use this perk is specifically for this build. Now, keep in mind that you can engrave assassin damage onto a piece of gear or warrior damage, but you get 20% damage with that. Now let's think about this. If you have 2 engraving slots and you put 20% warrior and 20% assassin on either piece, you have 20 of each. But if you put 10% all damage on both those pieces, you will have 20% assassin, 20% warrior, and 20% hunter. So when you're trying to increase damage across all, that's why it's called all damage. In this case, putting 2 10% all damages on your piece of gear makes a lot of sense for boosting that overall damage for everything. All right, let's move to the waist. We have crit damage and poison damage here. Now, here's another optional engraving. I engraved 30% melee resistance here. What this does is this drops your crit chance to about 90%, which is still really good. There are times you won't crit, but most of the time you are, and you're still dealing a lot of damage. But with this 30% melee resistance, you're able to take up to 4 or maybe 5 hits sometimes as a warrior, not having to worry about getting one-shotted on nightmares. So this one's up to you. You can engrave either crit chance here for a full 100% crit chance and be much more glass cannony, or you can engrave the melee resistance here if you want to be more, sacrifice just a little bit of damage for more tankiness. So this option is totally up to you. Alright, and finally the boots. We're going to put crit chance and crit damage at full health. Again, that's a very popular piece. You want to track one down with this for each one of the different perk types, warrior, hunter, or assassin. And then we engrave our final all damage there. So instead of going right into the abilities, I want to go right into the stats just to show you how evening all this out without even using the 100% damage perk, we're able to get 151% hunter damage, 150% assassin damage, and 124 warrior damage. On top of that, as a hunter, we're getting 262% headshot damage. So if you're landing a predator headshot, even without Sixth Sense active, the ability, you will one-shot any mercenary with a predator shot or with an assassination. It's quite amazing. Down here we have damage with staves. Thanks to abilities, that helps out quite a bit. On our critical modifiers, as you can see here, I opted for the 90% crit chance and a 717% crit damage. Again, you can make this 100% just by sacrificing the melee resistance. And then down here we have poison damage is reaching 241%, which is also dealing tons of hunter and warrior damage when you have that ability active. And then lastly, it's not much, but thanks to abilities and that single engraving and a couple ability points, we have an almost 40% melee resistance, which means almost half of all melee damage you take will be cut away. So that's still really good. It's not as tanky as other builds, but at some point you're gonna have to sacrifice something in order to be able to do everything. And I think that sacrificing a bit more tankiness for all the damage you deal out is worth it, and it's definitely not extremely glass cannony either. It's a very well tweaked and optimized build for sure. And as always, the stats and the links to this build will also be on the builds.ac website, where you can look at it from your computer or your mobile phone as well. So be sure to check that out instead of having to pause the video. All right, let's go over the abilities now, because there is a bit to this as well. So we're gonna have 3 ability wheels. We have a ranged wheel, a melee wheel, and a secondary assassin melee wheel. So for our hunter wheel, the primary ones you're gonna want to focus on is predator shot, multi-shot, and then the passives of archery master and sixth sense. And then I always put 1 point in arrow master for the paralyzing arrow, so that you can be knocking out these mercenaries instead of killing them and recruiting them. So you can use a paralyzing arrow to knock out a mercenary pretty much instantly. And the reason I use predator shot is because you can do this from a distance. Predator shot, I think, is a significantly better ability than other, including devastating shot, because you can shoot it from further away and it still deals a significant amount of damage, and you can control it to be able to maneuver it to guarantee a headshot every time. And so you're gonna want to grab predator shot with this build for sure. It's a lot of fun. Sixth sense is where the hunter damage just takes over. So you can one-shot any mercenary with predator shot on this build, but with sixth sense active, so when it slows down and sixth sense they notice you, it doubles that hunter damage and you're guaranteed to kill anyone at any time. So it might be good to use like sixth sense and then multi-shot, and you can just take out an entire crew of people right when you see them. So you will not be lacking in hunter damage with this build. For warriors, I would say putting points into the passives. Obviously the overpowered attacks for the staff, you're gonna be able to spin around and kill people very quickly. And then obviously you're gonna want to have the heals and the battle cry of Ares for when you get into fights. Now I am using the DLC versions of these. You don't have to, but there is a really cool and unique part of this. So if you aren't dealing enough melee damage and you're not having clearing out a conquest battle as fast as you can, there's a cool unique thing you can do with these 2 DLC abilities, the Ares Last Breath ability and the Ares Madness ability. So what's nice is the Ares Madness ability deals 35% assassin damage, and then the Ares Last Breath prevents you from receiving damage during that time, and it heals you when you're back up. And the other thing is they last for the same amount of time. They both last for 10 seconds. So what you're gonna want to do is trigger Ares Last Breath first and then Ares Madness. Now the reason you want to do it in that order is because when Ares Madness is activated, you can't use other abilities. So if you activate Ares Last Breath first and then Ares Madness, you'll be invincible and dealing assassin damage. And if you do a heavy attack with Ares Madness, you're basically doing Ring of Chaos every single time, dealing assassin damage, and you'll completely clear out a conquest battle very quickly that way. Now, if you don't have the DLC abilities, obviously Ring of Chaos is great, so is the charged heavy attacks, as well as Bull Rush for the warriors. So you're able to kind of switch in those other abilities if you're not able to do that. But for those of you who do have the DLC, using those 2 together as a warrior deals just an insane amount of damage. Alright, finally on the assassin end of things, obviously we're dealing with poison damage, so you're going to want to put points into venomous attacks and the buildup, as well as the passives for Shadow Assassin for the crit damage and the additional assassin damage, as well as Stealth Master. So I filmed a lot of this during the daytime because for the footage, but at night you will get significantly more assassin damage. So you'll notice yourself dealing way more damage if you're using this build at night as well. So that's totally up to you. And then I went ahead and placed points into Rush Assassination. You can one-hit mercenaries with this, as well as Hero Strike. Hero Strike doesn't quite one-hit mercenaries, but it nearly kills them, and all it takes is a few hits afterwards and you're able to take them out. So Hero Strike deals a significant amount of damage as well and is a great option. And then obviously you can always guarantee an instant death with critical assassination on mercenaries, but don't worry, every other unit besides mercenary will die from a regular assassination. And then lastly, if you want to play a little bit more assassin, you can use Vanish, or if you have the DLC, the Chronos Time Shift is really fun to jump into the air, use some hunter abilities, and then warrior abilities, and then hero strike. So what this build really frees you up to do is play all the playstyles at once in a way. You can use assassin damage to take someone out. You can engage someone with a rush assassination, use your warrior abilities, and then jump into the air and finish them off as a hunter. So there's all kinds of flexibility with this build, and it lets you do so much. All right, lastly, let's look at the masteries. Now, like I mentioned, it is a good idea. In order to hit all these one-shots, you're gonna need a good chunk of masteries. Now, you don't need it, but if you don't have as many as I do, you could focus on one if you prioritize on one playstyle more than the other. Overall, this build will still deal a lot of damage. And I guess what I'm getting at is it's not bad if you don't use masteries here. You just may not one-shot all the mercenaries. There may only be like a sliver of health left, but they may survive a rush assassination or a predator shot. But in actuality, that's not so bad considering the fact that it will only take a couple hits to finish them off. I just set those goals for myself so that I could show you that it's possible to make a build that does everything in the game. You just need a little bit more points to be able to kind of finish this off. So what you're gonna want to first focus on are crit chance on the hunter tree and crit chance while at full health on the assassin tree. If you can put 40 points into either of those, that'll get you at least to 90 or 100 depending on what engraving you chose for your waist. After that, you're going to want to put points into assassin damage, crit damage while at full health, damage while at full health, and then on the hunter side, hunter damage, crit damage, headshot damage. So those ones are important as well. After that, for warriors, it's a bonus to be putting points into damage with staffs and warrior damage on the warrior tree. But the main things to finish off the one-shotting is putting points into the specific abilities you want to use. Now, I was suggested this idea by someone on our Discord community named Vitor, so thank you so much for this. I don't typically use these masteries, but I was kind of stuck and the idea kind of came to me. So because my goal was to make predator shot and rush assassinations one shot, I decided to spend my points here. This is optional, but this is what I did to make that happen. And I put 12 points into both abilities. Now, I normally, like I mentioned, would not do this because I feel like those 12 points could be spent elsewhere, but this 8% multiplies and it guarantees a headshot on resistant mercenaries, especially resistant mercenaries against hunter damage. And then on the assassin side, it's the same thing with rush assassinate. So having those extra points on those specific abilities helps ensure that you get that last little bit of damage to ensure that they're killed in a single hit. So again, this build hits on a lot of points and uses perks and abilities that I normally wouldn't for a standard build, but I had to put the points in there specifically in order to hit the benchmarks that I wanted to hit. So it's totally up to you. You can copy this exactly to get the same experience I'm doing, or you can customize it yourself and focus it maybe on devastating shot or just hero strike. I'd only want hero strikes to one hit people, things like that. The main thing was splitting the damage up across the gear, leaning into some all damage perks, as well as trying to increase my hunter damage with headshot engravings. So all of that to say, this build hits every single benchmark that I would put for a damage build while also not being incredibly glass cannony, and it's really fun to play. play. Lastly, I came up with this Transmog that I think is pretty cool. It is made up of almost entirely DLC and Helix gear, so stick around if you want to know that. I'll tell you right now. So our primary staff Transmog is going to be the forged staff of the Isu from the Atlantis DLC. I like the way it lights up and it matches with silver. This honestly makes you look like a incredible Isu warrior assassin, very demigodish for sure. And then the bow, we're choosing the Paris bow variation, which comes from the default version of the game. It makes the quiver white as well as making your bow silver, just like your staff. For the head, we're using the Athena hood from the Helix store here. This gives us the white assassin hood with the gold kind of outlines on it. Another interesting one is you could use the Persephone helmet from the DLC if you want, but I prefer the hood. Kind of brings the whole assassin stuff together as well. For the gauntlets, we're using the Hekete's golden bracers. This is from the Atlantis DLC, the first legendary set you get from the first civilization set. For the chest, we're using the celestial torso from the Helix store. For the waist, we're doing no waist variation so that it looks like you're wearing like a jumpsuit or whatever. You could put the belt of before on, which is from this first civilization set, but I kind of like it without any waist on there. And then finally, we're doing the first civilization greaves on the bottom. Overall, I think that this build looks really cool, this Transmog. It is super Isu futuristic, which I think fits with the theme that the demigod, it can do anything. He can take on Isus or whatever it is. Overall, I think it looks fantastic. It gives me the vibes of an assassin, warrior, and a hunter, which is what I was trying to aim for, while also being otherworldly, because having a build that does all this is incredibly powerful. Alright, so that's the build. Thank you for the kind of the different format on this video. Appreciate it. Let me know if you kind of like that or if you want me to change it at all. And as always, if you have any questions, you can join the Discord. And if you're new here, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell. That really helps support my channel and helps me make more content. And I want to let you guys know again that I'm streaming on Twitch now instead of YouTube. It's a better platform for me due to the quality of the streams and the fact that I really want to start growing my audience there as well now that I'm starting to ramp up more streaming. So I'd really appreciate it if you wanted to follow me over there at twitch.tv/itsJordanDoes. And if you have enjoyed my streams here on YouTube, I will also be trying to maybe do some live streams on YouTube, but you can still watch my live streams over there without making an account. You just need to make an account if you want to chat with me, and that's not so bad. It's really quick to set it up. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this build, and I'll see you guys next time.
So